Hey everybody, it's Magic Prepper, and I wanted to talk about the evidence of the decline that I'm either experiencing here locally or witnessing nationally, and I wanted to relate with you to see if you're experiencing the same thing. And then if we are, we can all kind of be on the same page as to where we are on that current timeline of the collapse, because I think a lot of this evidence shows just what direction we're going in, and I find that to be problematic because it's not really something I want to experience, but here we are. Now, I am out here, I'm kind of taking it easy today. I'm trying out the new 229 Legion you see right here, which so far so good, and kind of testing out some equipment and gear related to it, including holsters, optics, all kinds of things. So speaking of that, I do want to mention that Midway USA is the biggest supporter of the channel, and thanks to them I can get out here, make videos like this, have these conversations, and try out new stuff in the future to give you some ideas about what you might want for your preparedness needs. So big thanks to Midway USA. Getting into it, okay? One of the big things that I've been seeing happening here locally that I want to just touch base on, because if this is happening nationwide, it's actually a big deal and it's a problem for all of us. One of the closest big cities, big we'll call it, here in North Dakota anyway, where I am, is Minot, North Dakota, where there's the Air Force Base and of course a lot of things related to nuclear weapons, but let's just not talk about that. But one thing that's happened there recently is that pretty much every gun store has closed. Like every gun store except for Shields, which is obviously a big box store, has closed, which is not good for people who want to be better prepared and want to exercise their Second Amendment rights. And we just had one of the only indoor ranges in the area closed down as part of those closures. It was a gun store as well that also did SOT things, such as providing suppressors and everything else to the civilian population. So I'm talking, let's see, we've lost 3 gun stores there just recently, including another gun store that went to only doing online, and all we have left is Shields. Is that happening in your area? Because to me, that's not a good sign. Now, all of them are basically experiencing the same thing. Hard economic times, they can't really afford to keep doing business, so they're having to close their doors. Some of that might be mismanagement in the sense of maybe setting expectations too high because of the COVID bump, right? But regardless, that's happening. And that's not good in general. It's definitely not a place we want to be here in America where all the gun stores are closing down, right? So that's happening here. To me, that's evidence of the decline because it's limiting our ability to get self-defense equipment, and it's also hurting the Second Amendment overall in the sense of what's available, right? So another thing that I've been running into a lot here locally, which maybe you are too, is just lots of expired food at the grocery stores. And not just my local grocery store, but all of the other grocery stores in the surrounding area. Just about every time I go to the store and I start shopping for food, I'll pick up at least one item that's out of date, and sometimes by a lot. For example, we're at the end of July right now, right? And I was just recently at my local grocery store and I picked up a container of cream cheese, right? And it was out of date by like 2 months. So yeah, is some of that competence in the sense of the workers and everyone who's involved in making sure that that stuff's still not on the shelf at this point? Sure. But it can't just be incompetence every single time that it happens when it's not just at that one location. And anytime I buy groceries just about anywhere here in my area, I will find one thing that's expired, right? And so is that something you're running into too? Because to me, that shows that we're on the wrong path when it comes to one of the most important parts of our daily lives, which is our food intake and whether or not that's spoiled, right? And so if I were you, at the bare minimum, just double check all your groceries before you're buying stuff, because some of that stuff has been really far out of date. And when it comes to fresh food, of course, like dairy or meats or anything like that, you may want to be a little bit more careful, right? Now, that's just what I'm experiencing. I'm sharing this with you all because I just think it's something to keep in mind and to think about. Because if you're having the same thing happen and you're just kind of thinking of it as being like, oh, you know, just some kind of circumstantial situation and it's periodically an issue, but not really a big problem because I always just check. But then you realize it's also happening to me, and you realize it's happening to the other 5 people in the comment section who are letting us know that's happening. Maybe it's a bigger problem, right? Now, as I go through puberty, once again, it's like I need more facial hair, right? So another one, and now this is on the more national thing, but it's just something that I wanted to bring up. This whole situation in Houston after Hurricane Beryl was kind of eye-opening, of course, for a lot of people there, but should be eye-opening for you too, because it took CenterPoint Energy 12 days to get power back up for every single customer. Now, they got 50% or so power restored within 48 hours, but then it took another 10 days after that to get everybody back online. And we knew the storm was coming. Assets should have been in place. And we are in the year 2024, right? Where we have all the capabilities and technology that we have. And it still took 12 days to get power back on for everybody, right? Now, some people got it sooner, but it took 12 days to say that everything was fully restored. That's a really long time, considering that this was a relatively localized event in a highly dense population area, which is part of why it was affecting so many people. But this wasn't like the entire country, right? Like, this wasn't the entire state of Texas. This was just a portion of Houston. And in order for that to require 12 days to get back online, what do you think it would take for the entire state to get back online? What do you think it would take for the entire western portion of the United States to get back online? What would it take for the entire eastern seaboard to get back online? 12 days is unacceptable, especially in the year 2024. But that response and the amount of time it took in order to get everybody power should be something you're thinking about in the sense of this decline we're all currently experiencing. There's no reason that in the year 2024 it should have taken that long. Now, some of that is based on threats and risks that were associated with some of the locals in the area. And that is definitely something that you could bring up to say why it took so long. But regardless, all of those things should have been anticipated. And with working with the state and local officials in order to get things back up and running, I still find it unacceptable. It doesn't matter what the circumstances were. This is just evidence to me that we're not prepared for larger emergencies, and our response to them, even now in 2024, is unacceptable and would have been unacceptable 20 years ago even, right? But here we are, just another piece of evidence that we're on our way down, right? Which is not where I want to be. I'd like to see America back up on the up and up, but currently, with our current situation, that's not really in the cards. So, another thing that I've been kind of taking stock of, I don't know, making myself aware of, and something that concerns me in the sense of us moving more towards a third world country type situation, is the rise of multi-generational households, right? Now, culturally, that is pretty common, especially with people from, a Latin America origin, right? So people from, Mexico, Central America, South America, like they have a culture that's established the fact that multi-generational households make sense, right? And so that's always kind of been the thing, but it's expanding past that now. And especially with young people and this new generation that's up and coming, people are living in homes with their parents and their grandparents and extended family, like aunts, uncles, cousins. They're all living in houses together because it's just unaffordable to live on their own at this point. And that may be by design, because we know that the powers that be would love to see people stuffed into smaller, more cramped areas so they are easier to monitor and control. But it's also a very common practice in third world countries, right? And it's not just something that's happening to the cultures who generally accept it as a way of life at this point in time. Now it's happening to everybody. And Americans in general are finding themselves more and more often living in multi-generational households. And I have people I know personally that are dealing with that right now. And that's just not a good sign. That to me is evidence of the decline. I moved out of my house at 18 years old working as a line cook, right? I barely got by when it came to rent and food and everything else, but I still made it work. People can't do that now. And so their only option is to stick around. And that's not good. That's not the way things are supposed to work. So, now, the last piece of evidence I want to discuss. It's personal, but local, but probably something you've seen too, especially if you're in the market for like an old used vehicle. So I'm actually working on getting a used truck because I want to get something that's old and beat up for around the property, something that I can still get around in if I want to, but something I don't have to worry about too much either, and that would be easy to work on myself, right? And so most likely I'm looking for an older Chevy just because parts for Chevrolets are so abundant and so affordable and easy to come by, or maybe some kind of older Toyota just because it might run for quite a while and maybe not need as much maintenance. But either way, what I'm seeing on this journey of trying to buy a used truck, right, which should be pretty easy to come by in the sense of being affordable and at a price point that makes me not really care about it a whole lot, right? But for some reason, what I'm finding is, for example, a 1994 Chevy, 1500, right? So your standard half-ton pickup. Chevy 1500 with the V8, four-wheel drive. It's got 250,000 miles on it, right? And at this point, it's 30 years old. It's got some rust. Don't worry about that. Some of the lights might be on. Still runs though, drives good, apparently, right? Only $6,500, right? $6,500 for a 30-year-old truck that's rusted out with 250,000 miles on it. I don't know how that's a good sign of anything, right? And maybe people feel like other people are desperate enough to just say, sure, I need it, and it's one of the cheaper things right now that is within my price range, so I guess I'll just buy it. But that's not a good sign in my opinion. A truck like that should be really easy to afford, but $6,500 for something that might not make it back to your house is unacceptable, right? But that's just not one listing. Like, that's the majority. Like, that's mostly what I'm finding. And that's out of control, which means somebody who's just getting started, or somebody who just finally got some property, or maybe moved out and got their own place, for once, and needs a truck to kind of get some stuff done around the house or whatever. Somebody who's in a beginner's situation can't even afford to get into a vehicle that can do the basic function of having a truck bed without spending the kind of money that should get you something decently usable. But instead, $6,500 at this point is just rolling the dice to see whether or not you'll make it all the way home before you have a breakdown. And to me, that is evidence of the decline. And I'm not sure if you've been shopping for an old truck or a beater truck or whatever you want to call it, right? But I have, and I just refuse to pay that for that low of quality. I'm just not going to do it, right? I don't need to do it, but it's something I want to do. I just can't, not for that kind of money. And so if you've been shopping around and kind of experiencing that too, let me know, because if any of these 5 things are something you've noticed or have seen happening, especially, the multi-generational homes or the gun shops closing or the expired food, right? Let me know in the comments below, because as a community, it could really help us all be aware of the fact that the things we're personally experiencing aren't necessarily isolated, right? These are things that are happening all over the place, which really starts to paint a picture as to what it is we're actually experiencing right now and what part of the decline we're currently in. And that's why I wanted to share this with everybody, because it can't just be me. I really don't believe that. And if it is, well, I don't know what to say. So, let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. Make sure you hit like, subscribe, all those things. You should probably check that you are subscribed, because a lot of times you might not be anymore. And of course, if you want to support the channel directly, go to magicprepper.com, where there's a lot of stuff there that could help you out. And besides that, that's going to be it for Magic Prepper.